Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those of you who are attending us live and for those of you that are going to be joining us virtually live on our site when we upload it. This webinar today is really talking about the current version of Google Analytics, what we call Universal Analytics today, and what it means when they're sunsetting in 2023. We're going to talk a lot about GA4 as well, obviously the future of Google Analytics. My name is Brad Prenger. I lead our partnerships team at InfoTrust. I'm grateful to spend my days talking with industry leaders like you in this space. I get to understand where's your pain, where are your challenges, your needs, and then how does that fit with InfoTrust and our services and our team that really helps our organizations advance their analytics maturity. I'm based here in our headquarters in Cincinnati, Ohio. I have a lovely wife and 3 young kids, and I'm joined by Amin Shawki, based in Chicago. Amin, I'll pass it over to you for a quick intro.
Thank you, Brad. Hello, everybody. Amin Shawki, VP of Client Services. I oversee our digital analytics global teams. I've been with InfoTrust over 10 years, living in Cincinnati, in Dubai with our global operations, and then now in Chicago, as Brad mentioned. I also have a wife and 1 kid, one boy with 1 on the way, and a dog, of course. Love the French Bulldog. So excited to be here talking about GA4, UA sunset, and answer any questions you guys have. So.
By the way, congratulations, Amin. If we do see Amin run out of here fast, just know it's for a good reason and we should all celebrate. So yes. We all heard last week from Google that they will be sunsetting Universal Analytics in 2023, which is a little more than a year from now, my friends. We know this is a huge announcement, shocking to some, surprising to some, expected to some, but most of us, as we've all been using Google Analytics since 2005, fun fact, I thought it'd be fun to research what was happening in 2005. American Idol was the #1 television show, and Carrie Underwood just won season 4 of Idol. So that, my friends, is when Google Analytics started. To give you the time reference, that's stupendous, right? It's time, though, for the future of Google Analytics, which we as an end-to-end analytics organization are super excited about. Amin here has the agenda. I want to walk through what you're going to get out of today's session. First, #1, background and details into the announcement last week. We wanted to get quick to the market. We're obviously getting a lot of questions from our clients, potential clients. We want to make sure you understand what's happening so you can take it back to your organization and share. The second is the benefits of GA4 versus Universal Analytics. We're super excited about Google Analytics 4, the features, the benefits. We've frankly been working with Google since 2019 on giving feedback, sharing product things that we'd like to see. And a lot of them have come true, which is great. We're going to walk through an approach. So instead of just talking about what's happening, we put together an approach for our clients and for organizations making this transition over the next year called ETLT approach for migration and preserving your universal analytics data, and how to get started today. And we're going to leave time for Q&A, my friends. So this is not a webinar where we want to take a bunch of questions during the time, because we believe we're going to answer a lot of those questions that you have or your teams have during our session, but we will leave at least 15 minutes to answer live questions from the audience. So please be patient with us. We're going through a lot of content, but hopefully it's a lot of good content and answers and gives you a little bit more piece of what you can expect with the next 12 to 18 months. Before we get there, those of you who don't know InfoTrust and aren't fortunate where we don't have the pleasure of being your partner, we are a digital end-to-end analytics consultancy. We specialize everything from data governance, helping with the foundation of how you're collecting data, all the way to advanced analytics of doing things like customer lifetime value. We have been one of Google's longest standing partners, and this is really why we're hosting this today, is to really share direct insight from all of our clients across the globe, what we're working on, what's happening, the approach, and help you make this transition successfully. There's a couple other things here on InfoTrust. We're not going to spend a lot of time, but if you do want a copy of our book, I have to mention this. It's an amazing book for anybody in the industry. Please send a note to our marketing team, put it in the chat. We will get you a copy of Crawl, Walk, Run, Advancing Your Analytics Maturity with Google Marketing Platform. And by the way, it has a whole section on GA4 in case the content today is not enough for you. This is just another, again, give you awareness of how we approach our partnerships. This is not a sales pitch. This is just to showcase InfoTrust, our expertise, what we're known for, and where we sit in the industry. So again, as I mentioned, that crawl, walk, run approach, this gives you some areas that we focus in. We'd be happy to have conversations about these areas. If there's interest, if you see some of these topics on the screen today, they're like, oh, my manager just brought that up, or my team's really grilling me on this. One of the things, server side, right? We know that's another hot topic. So let us know if we can help. We're here, but let's jump into the actual content. Before I pass it to my colleague, Amin, here's what I will say. Who you gonna call about GA4? InfoTrust. It's joke. I mean, this is my dad joke that I'm sharing with the audience today, but don't be afraid of GA4. This is a really good thing. I just mentioned Carrie Underwood in 2005 won American Idol. That's how long Google Analytics has been around. This is innovation. This is the future. There's so many opportunities within GA4, and we're excited to help you bring it to market to help your business. So Amin, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate that. And gotta love a good movie reference there. So I'm going to start with some background about Google Analytics overall, Universal Analytics, GA4, and what we know. So we're going to get right to the bullet points. A couple notes before I jump in. This is being recorded and going to be available. I think the slides also possibly for download, but we have a blog post about this. We're going to have more content in the future. So feel free to be fully engaged here, ask questions. Feel free to take notes if that's what you need to do, but know the content will be accessible to you later on. So a little bit of history. I don't have Carrie Underwood on this slide, but she would be in the far left here. This is just a little background to start about Google Analytics and some of the background and the iterations that it's gone through. And the one thing that we hear from our Google partners and have been a part of is over the last few years, Google Analytics 4 has actually been around, but it was rebranded. So it was originally called App Plus Web back when it was launched in beta in 2018, and has had updates since then, but particularly in the last year and now in the next year ahead, where it will be the focus and primary platform within Google for their analytics services. So wanted just to show this from a kind of a background perspective. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. But where we are today in 2022 is with the official announcement of UA, Universal Analytics, being sunset next year, adoption and transitioning fully to GA4 as where we want to play. I will talk about a little bit of the roadmap, high level, that Google plans for its Google Analytics 4 product. I know there's been lots of questions about this feature or that feature, and that's not available today, but it is in Universal Analytics. Is it coming? When is it coming? I'll touch on a few of those. But rest assured that if you're one of our partners or if you want to have a conversation later, we can probably share more if you have specific questions about specific features or capabilities and if and when they'll be available with GA4. So that's just a little bit of background. Let's get into some of the things you should know. Some of this you might already know from the content we've shared or what you've read, but just to kind of lay the foundation. First and foremost, some of the key dates. So Google announced Universal Analytics will be sunset in 2023. There's actually two dates that, or months, I should say, around this announcement for Universal Analytics free or non-enterprise, non-360 paid product properties. Those will be sunset in 2023, specifically July. What that means is processing will actually stop. So any data that you're sending off your sites or apps or other platforms into your Universal Analytics properties as of July of 2023 just won't process. It'll be cut off from that, no additional data collection. If you're a 360 or enterprise customer, you have properties that are enabled for 360 capabilities, the paid version, you have until October 2023 before processing stops for any data that you're pushing into the platform. As far as the user interface or actual accessibility to the data, Google has mentioned that that will be available 6+ months later than when processing stops. So between July and October of 2023, 6 months plus, that's the way Google's worded it, you'll have still access to the UI to look at historical data. So it's not on October 2023 for enterprise clients, data stops collecting and you just don't have access at all. You will still have access to be able to look at your data for those properties. It just won't have any data net new moving forward. The way Google Analytics 4 works, kind of shown in the previous slide, it's built on a totally new platform. I actually will talk about this a little bit later. The model is completely different. Therefore, it is a completely separate property and data collection approach. So there is no way to migrate your historical universal analytics data into your GA4 properties. There's ways you can connect the two properties and advantages of so, importing some settings and integrations. But as far as porting data from your universal analytics properties over to your GA4 properties in the UI or in the Google servers, not possible. The models are different. There are, however, ways to export and preserve your data, which we'll talk about later in this webinar, in our TETLT approach that Brad will talk about. So because of that, GA4 does need to be dual tagged to have data collection in place for these new properties. Dual tagging, just to clarify what this means is however you're collecting your data currently in Universal Analytics, your current analytics properties, you'll need to add GA4 side by side to that. So whether that's on a website through a tag management system like Google Tag Manager or Telium or others, Google Analytics 4 will be another tag deployed side by side Universal Analytics. Yes, there are some ways where you can use your Universal Analytics deployment to then send data out to Google Analytics 4. That is possible, but typically what we suggest is side-by-side tagging. Even with that approach of using your Universal Analytics deployment, if it's using GTag, not going to get too technical today, and adding GA4 to that, that's still dual tagging because you're sending data to two places, Universal Analytics and your GA4 properties. We recommend getting that set up as soon as possible. Almost all, if not all of our partners have begun this journey. We've been talking about it for a year or so. Now there's a little bit more critical timing to do that sooner so that you can have year-over-year analysis capabilities for at least the key metrics. What we're proposing to our partners is get your core conversions, events, if you're e-commerce organization, get orders and revenue and add to cart, those key actions that will be critical to have year-over-year analysis. Get those set up ASAP. Secondary or tertiary metrics and events and capabilities, you have some time to plan that deployment, but it's better to start immediately if you haven't already to get those core events, those core data collection metrics and data that you need set up now, particularly because July and October dates. Again, we say by end of June to allow that year-over-year analysis if you have some properties that are not 360. Again, if you're a 360 customer, you have a little bit more time before processing stops in 2023. So I mentioned earlier talking a little bit about Universal Analytics capabilities versus GA4. We understand and totally feel the fact that Google Analytics 4 does not have all the product features for every use case to be considered at parity for different types of organizations. Google Analytics 4 has a very robust roadmap, and most of the features that Google feels are enterprise level, such as roll-up capabilities or subset of data capabilities in Universal, that's views, and GA4, that's subproperties, they've launched those. But for specific use cases for different types of organizations, some of these features are still being rolled out. And the plan is to roll out most of them this year in 2022, still being mindful of the 2023 processing sunset timeline. So some examples for an e-commerce retailer might be really important to have product level custom dimensions or item scope custom dimensions. Those are in the roadmap. They're not available today in GA4, but they will be this year. That's something that I can share. That second half of this year is when Google is planning to launch those. As of now, subject to change, all the CYA commentary, since we're not Google. But from what we've heard, they're working on it, on getting it deployed this year. Our hope is that it is before October of 2022 to allow that year-over-year analysis capabilities, and we believe that will be possible. If you want more information about specific features, like I mentioned, specific capabilities that might be available in Universal today, you're unsure if it will be available in GA4, or you heard it will be, but not sure when, feel free to reach out to us. We can see what we can share, particularly if you're a partner of ours on 360, you're under NDA with Google, we could share a little bit more detail about those specific features based on your use cases. However, Majority of this webinar will talk about net new features or capabilities with GA4 that do not exist in Universal Analytics and why we're excited about the new platform and the new things that you can do within it. So another question that sometimes comes up, especially lately as we're talking about migration, what about our downstream systems, our integrated CRM platforms, any tool that is building audiences based on Google Analytics data that's Universal Analytics, or dashboards and visualizations? All those will need to be rebuilt with a new data source, which is your GA4 properties. With Google Analytics 4, similar to Universal Analytics, there's an integration with Bigquery. If you're using the Google Data Warehouse capabilities in GCP, it has its own schema, and you can reference that to rebuild your downstream integrated systems or dashboards. Pro tip, a colleague of mine and I last year did a webinar on this very topic. It might have been a little bit ahead of its time, but now completely relevant since we're talking about what a migration plan looks like between Universal Analytics and GA4. So feel free to check that out. Maybe we can post that link in the chat or as part of a follow-up. So yes, downstream integrated systems will need to be rebuilt or reconnected. Within your GA4 property specifically, you'll have to reconnect your Google Ads, your GMP products, your BigQuery, because again, they're separate properties entirely. But pro tip that we actually didn't write down, you can create your GA4 properties and link them to your existing Universal Analytics properties, if that makes sense to link, same structure, and then import some of the settings. So for one of our partners that's a global enterprise, we created all their GA4 production properties based off their existing Universal Analytics properties and imported all the Google Ads integrated links to avoid having to rework with all global media agencies. Saved a lot of time, allowing us to accelerate their GA4 deployment. Pro tips like that, but yes, you will have to set up some things anew. Another point that might be not as known, this is primarily for enterprise partners that use GA360 today with Universal Analytics. You can upgrade your GA4 properties if you have them, or will create them today to enable the 360 features for GA4 at no additional cost. If you have an active current GA360 license that's based off Universal Analytics hits. You can also switch your license to be GA4 360 based, which has a slightly different pricing model. And I think we'll touch on that briefly in this webinar. And if you do switch to GA4 360 based license to maintain your GA4 360 features, you will also keep Universal Analytics at that 360 capabilities for 6 months. So Google has extended that. Actually, they only provided 3 months as of late, and then extended that to 6 months of full 360 capabilities in your previous Universal Analytics properties if you switch your license. There could be some advantages, which again, we'll talk about a little bit later with the slightly different pricing model and the way that Google has positioned it to really be positioned to allow organizations to grow as their data volume grows. So there's other key features too. I'll have a slide that you guys can reference that compare GA4 free versus 360 as well. I think lastly, from things you should know, as part of this announcement, Google also mentioned that GA4 will have new privacy features and capabilities coming very, very soon, and some launched already. That's only for GA4. So there's lots of capabilities with Universal Analytics around privacy and data control, and based on regulations and browser changes, things like that. GA4 will have even more. It's actually built and designed to be more privacy centric. So some things that Google announced in one of their blog posts, and I think a recent webinar they did, IP addresses removed entirely. More data controls are coming to say what metadata you want to capture, particularly by country or region, since every country and region has varying rules and regulations, and there's more to come. So be on the lookout from us or from Google for that info. Okay, so time check. I think I need to go a bit quicker, but we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of GA4 versus Universal Analytics at this point. The bullets I shared before is what we know. Looking forward to your questions later on if you have any. Just a quick note as far as how do we know so much about this? If you're not familiar with InfoTrust, we're one of Google's premier enterprise partners for their analytics stack. So these are some of the things that we provide versus what Google provides. We try to ensure we share as much information about the technologies, the roadmap, especially what's relevant for every organization's use cases. But ultimately, Google's the one building the tech and has kind of the roadmap for the products. So a quick slide just to show a little bit of the evolution of Google Analytics. And one of the questions that commonly comes up is, why did they even build GA4? Universal Analytics was working just fine. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that the Universal Analytics data model was still disjointed. Even though the name says Universal Analytics, you can capture data from any platform. If you're tracking on mobile apps, you're based off screen views and that specific type of model versus web is all page views and session based. With Firebase being part of the acquisition Google had in the last couple of years, they've changed their mobile app model to be events and parameters. Saw that was really scalable and powerful to unlock new capabilities, brought it to the website to unify App plus Web. That's why the original name was App plus Web for GA4. And that's a new model. What this also allows is less reliance on cookies or session-based identifiers, which is very privacy-centric and forward-looking with the changing ecosystem and landscape, particularly with regulations and things that are causing session-based analysis to be more difficult or not compliant, frankly speaking. So Google Analytics 4 is designed to be privacy-centric with more features being rolled out, particularly because of the event-based model. Talked about the data model that's changed and why we're excited about that, because it allows you to streamline your analytics, pull in the same data collection across different platforms versus having to kind of piece it all together from different types of digital tools like web or apps. One thing that I don't think has been mentioned as much lately, but because of the event-based model and Google's ability to now scale what it can do on the processing side, there's going to be a lot more built-in machine learning and artificial intelligence capabilities. So anomaly detection, predictive audiences, things like that, and a couple I'll share in a few slides. That's all going to be built into the tool versus with Universal Analytics, most of that had to be exported out, done in your data warehouse with your data science teams and modeling, then pushed back out to actually action on those. With Google Analytics 4, that'll be built in, and I'll show a couple examples as well as privacy focused features like consent mode and some of the modeling that goes into that. Data integration, similar to Universal Analytics with all the Google tools that auto integrate, but now with even more capabilities, such as an SLA for Bigquery. I'll talk about that. If you're a 360 organization, doesn't exist with UA today, as well as a little bit more enhanced integrations with some of the limits that you can do between GA4 and those other products. That ultimately leads to more activation. Google is a advertising media technology company. Google Analytics 4 is designed mainly to power your marketing. That is just the fact. So Google Analytics 4 is designed to not only be privacy centric and allow you to do all the analysis and derive insights that you need, but also power up your marketing, allow more and enhanced activation. I'm actually gonna, I think, go quickly through this slide. It just builds on the last slide overview, but again, you can have access to this presentation later, but just a little bit more detail on each section of why we're excited or the capabilities, some of the key features within them that are good to keep in mind and why we're excited for GA4. I'll have a couple of screenshots coming up here to paint the picture a little bit further. So one thing that I wanted to call out is with GA4, there's a section that I think this screenshot might be outdated now. It's called Explorations, essentially white space reporting. So with Universal Analytics, lots of out-of-the-box reports, lots of drill downs and different sections that you can look at, but it's very restrictive. You can build custom reports, but most of the time with our experience with our partners, if you want to do anything custom, you're exporting that data out, you're building it in Data Studio or some other dashboard platform. With GA4, you can still do that. You can still use Data Studio, still export to Bigquery and do whatever you need to do. But you can also have, right in the tool, some white spacing reporting capabilities. So this is just a sample of some of the new report features that are available to any GA4 user. So funnels, custom funnels, that's a 360 only feature in UA. Now it's available to anyone in GA4. Pathing analysis, cohort analysis, all these different report types allow you to really build at your leisure here with some of the structure of permissions. So you can, with GA4, there's also going to be lower level rules for who has access to what type of data or what type of reports, or which reports actually appear when someone logs in. Universal Links, it's structured. You log in, everyone sees the same set of reports. GA4, there's a lot more customization there, which allows you to maybe bring more structure to your organization as well. Machine learning and AI built in. I wanted to show an example here. I already kind of talked verbally about it, but there are sections in Google Analytics 4 that are for automated insights, anomaly detection, and then also from an audience perspective, once you have data feeding in, there might be some pre-built automatic audiences for things like customers likely to churn or likely to convert. Again, making it a little bit more simple to action on the data versus just focusing on analysis and then actioning elsewhere. So a couple cool use cases there. One thing that we're really excited about is consent mode with Google Analytics 4. So consent mode is essentially a way to indicate to your Google tags how they should behave based on the consent preferences a user provides. What we've seen, I'm going to keep this high level because we have plenty of content on our site and other webinars that our experts have led. But one thing that we've seen with organizations over the last few years that have deployed consent management, particularly in Europe, is if a user doesn't consent, nothing gets tracked at all. It's just a big gap and a big drop in data collection. With consent mode, there's options or opportunities there where even if a user doesn't consent to have their personal data tracked, there's anonymous data, cookieless data that you can capture for some signals, or modeling that can be put into, if they didn't consent, modeled behavior, so that at least you get some directional insights on how the behavior is going, or behavioral information in your analytics so that you can make your decisions. So instead of a big gap or just drop from consent, it allows you to fill that gap potentially with a little bit more options. So again, a lot more information about consent mode separately on our site, but it is useful to keep in mind with the changing landscape and privacy regulations. All right, kind of shifting gears here, as far as Google Analytics 4 360, the enterprise version of GA4, I mentioned earlier, it might be advantageous to consider, particularly if you're an enterprise client paying for GA360 today with Universal, really with two key reasons. One, there's a lower minimum events per month tier, so the entry point is much lower than Universal Analytics. We know for some organizations, the cost and entry point of 500 million hits per month was not possible. Now with GA4, there's lower tiers, lower opportunities to enter into the 360 capabilities. Also, the tiers are not linear as far as the more data you track or capture as your business grows, the more you pay in a linear fashion. It now evens out as a curve. And that's what's shown there on the right, that the price you pay, there's a base fee, but then over time, the cost per event goes down. Google doesn't want to penalize organizations for growing and having more data collection within GA4. So there's a little bit more variable pricing there. Again, for existing clients that might be on this call, we're happy to talk through what that could look like, keeping in mind that to have an accurate estimate, you want GA4 fully deployed. All the event data collection in place, features that will affect pricing like roll-up properties, sub-properties are also in place for the true most accurate estimate of what your pricing might be if you were to switch to GA4 360. But it might be advantageous for some organizations, depending on their structure, particularly how they use sub-properties or roll-up properties. One slide that I like to share when I talk to organizations when they're thinking about, what does GA4 bring to us? Well, on the free version or 360 version, these are some of the key pillars or capabilities available. I'm not going to go through each bullet here, but I think the way that this slide is bucketed is useful. There's more control over your data governance features, performance and scalability. Between GA4 free and GA4 360, there's a lot of extra processing that can be done because of the new event model. And there's key feature differences between things like the amount of conversions or data retention controls, et cetera. But the real call out here are those big red X's. At least that's what I point to. For GA4 360, that's essentially, as an enterprise, you need the SLAs, you need the security features. That's where the 360 version comes in. With any Google product that's free, there are no SLAs. And there's, or even if there are, they're not as robust as a 360 enterprise version. So the one tactical call out that for those data scientists or people that work in data warehouse land might appreciate, with GA4 360, there is an SLA coming for the Bigquery daily export. I know that's been a pain point for a lot of organizations where we don't know for sure what day or what time of day the Bigquery export will fully kick in because there's no SLA behind it. That is coming with GA4 360. It's not here yet, but it's coming very soon, as we were told, for the first half of this year. All right, I feel like I just talked, for about 25 minutes. So we want to take a pause. What I'm showing on the screen here is a screenshot. We have a piece of collateral or document that compares Universal Analytics Free, Universal Analytics 360, or the current GA 360, GA4 Free, and GA4 360 on a slew of different features and capabilities. So I'm going to launch a poll to see if you'd like us to send you this comparison guide directly that compares not only GA4 Free and GA4 360 like in the previous slide, but actually the Universal Analytics features, or sorry, versions as well. So if you want to fill out the poll, if you say yes, I believe our team can see who you are to contact you and send you this directly. If you're not interested, no problem. My feelings are very hurt, but I'll get over it. It's all good. No, I'm just kidding. It's just wanted to kind of take a break here. And this is also where we're going to shift who's leading the rest of the webinar, which will be Brad. But let's give it another maybe 10 seconds. I see good amount of responses.
So while we wait, Amin, I can tell I have a dad joke now. I have prepared since you challenged me at the start. Why did the computer show up late for work? Because it had a hard drive. Sorry, I'm here all day. All right.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I'm going to end the poll. Thank you for filling those out, and I will be back in the Q&A later on. So Brad, I believe over to you.
All right. Thank you, Amin. That was a wealth of information, and I saw some questions come through the chat. As promised, we're going to leave 15 minutes, maybe even longer, on giving an opportunity to ask those questions live, and hopefully it's helpful for everybody. So thank you, Amin, for sharing all that. Lots of information. Again, we are here to answer any questions, help your teams that weren't able to join this call. Please share this webinar, and we're happy to help. But the most exciting part we want to save for the end before Q&A is our TETLT approach for migration and preserving UA data, Universal Analytics data. The reason we put this together is we wanted to make sure we didn't just talk about all of these changes and then be like, good luck, go figure it out. We wanted to at least provide a framework that we are using with our clients and in the process of talking with our clients about, to how do we go from using Universal Analytics, everybody in the organization is trained, they understand it, they've been using it for years, by the way, since Carrie Underwood won IDOL. And then how do we move towards a brand new platform that can benefit our organization, help us better understand audiences, and really drive better marketing and understand our customers better. So we're going to walk through this approach. This is not, here's the price, here's the actual deliverables. This is to share the approach that we're taking. We'd love to talk further on how this would look for your organization. But this gives you something to go back to the team, go back with your organization and say, these are things we need to be thinking about over the upcoming months, and as we look to, as Universal Analytics looks to sunset. So the first is tag. Amin mentioned this, the really most critical piece that everybody needs to understand. It's fine if you don't want to make GA4 as your source of truth for many different reasons. What's most critical right now is getting GA4 on your site alongside Universal Analytics, the dual tag. You want to make sure that when you do move over in that July and October sunset dates of next 2023, you want to make sure you have that year-over-year data. So what that allows you to do is it allows you to evaluate what you're collecting in Universal Analytics, what you're missing. It allows you to compare side by side. How does this data different? I saw in the question, like, what does that Bigquery schema look like? It's very different for GA4 than versus GA. And then you can make recommendations on what is good for our business, what is not good, how do we understand what we're getting on this? It gives you that comparison model. So first and foremost, tag. The second one is the ETL. So extract, get your Universal Analytics data as quickly as possible to preserve the historical data. So daily automated process, this is where Bigquery, obviously we are Google Cloud certified. We do quite a bit of this work, but we want to make sure that you get your data, your historical data that all of your decision makers are looking at and understanding, and make sure you can get that to preserve the data. So extract your data out, then transform. You want to translate what are the most important metrics to your organization, what really drives your business and allows you to move forward in this transition. So an example, how do we look at conversion rates, session-based metrics? All of those need to be calculated in your data warehouse because those are not available in GA4 because of the new data collection model. So you don't want to wait until the last second and then try to figure this out and explain to leadership why your dashboard that they've been looking at for 5 years is completely wrong and doesn't match up. You want to start doing this now so you can extract, transform, and the final piece is load. So load the important metrics in those dashboards that you determine to start separation from the Universal Analytics interface. So you want to start migrating the organization of getting them understanding what the dashboard looks like today in Universal Analytics and what it's going to look like with Google Analytics 4. And the final step is train. Getting to talk with a lot of potential clients, current clients, training is not coming up enough. And think about how old Google Analytics is. This is a brand new data collection platform. There should be a process that you're working through. Some of our enterprises, we're building training curriculums for them. So they can have, depending on the user of analytics, they can make sure that this person who's making decisions today can make decisions in the future when GA4 is the source of truth. So again, the training is self-explanatory, but make sure you're bringing this to your teams to say, what is our plan to train folks that may have known Universal Analytics really well, but they need to understand Google Analytics 4 and all of the features, benefits, privacy safe things that are going to allow your organization to move faster. So those are the three. We didn't want to spend a lot of time on that, but those are the 3 steps. We're happy to talk more, but hopefully that gives you all a framework to start thinking about those 3 steps and, well, multiple steps within the 3 slides to then take steps as you prepare for that sunset coming in 2023. A couple more things and we'll get to QA. Looks like we're going to have a little bit extra time, which is awesome. There we go. Going along with our framework that we talk with every single one of our clients and partners about is, how do I get from here to there? And this goes a little bit along the lines of what we just shared, but this gives you an idea of, as we think about the crawl, walk, run for GA4 and adopting it, these are the steps that you can take, and it gives you very nice bullets. We'll send these slides out afterwards. But this gives you at least a framework to, if you feel like you're behind, if the information shared today is overwhelming, this simplifies it for you to say, what are the steps we can take today to prepare for the future of Google Analytics? So a very high level, implement GA4, get it dual tagged, test and learn, understand what's different, understand the benefits, the pros, understand what may be different, and you need to educate certain people in the organization, and then have GA4 as your source of truth sooner than later, because that gives you a competitive advantage because there's a lot more features and benefits available in the future of Google Analytics, which is GA4. And finally, just a couple housekeeping, I will call it, resources, upcoming events. We have an entire Google Analytics 4 resource page. So if you're looking, I know weekend time, a lot of you like to go to InfoTrust.com and read all of our resources. This is a perfect opportunity to educate yourself on GA4 because we have a long list of resources, all different topics of GA4 over the past year and a half, 2 years, as well as many more coming, like the webinar we're hosting today. And finally, we have a summit coming up. If you find yourself in the crypto, finance, insurance, digital analytics space, please check out the link there, register, it's free. We typically give away a Peloton. That's pretty exciting. So we'd love to see you there. We got an outstanding lineup. We got head of industry at Google. We have a crypto kind of industry lead within the space. So check that out. All of our details are on the website. We would love to see you there. Thank you for the conversation today. We hope this was helpful. More importantly, we want to get to the QA. I'm going to pull up the chat right now. I know we've been getting questions. We had some questions come in. I'm going to actually pass these questions to Amin, and we're going to walk through them.
And Brad, I launched, in case anyone wants to drop off, which I don't know why you would, this is the most exciting part.
I agree.
But I launched just an exit poll if you want more information outside of this. So thank you for filling that out as well.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, this is from Dan Mesa. One thing I'm struggling with is GA4 is calculating conversion rates. Can you talk about how the new event level data model should be used with respect to measuring conversion? I feel like total conversions are much harder to work with.
Yeah, it's a great question, Dan. I had this conversation with a lot of our team members, even just this week. We were talking about that in our TETLT model. So it's true that with Google Analytics 4, it's an event-based model and has user metrics. Right now, session-based metrics are some. There's more session-based dimension capabilities coming as well in the roadmap. But for the most part, Google, with virtue of how they're building the tool, is trying to move away from session-based analysis. Conversion rates are often session-based. E-commerce conversion rate is how many times there's an e-commerce transaction versus sessions that start on your platforms. So as far as how we think about it, it kind of depends, which I know is a terrible answer, but you know, looking at conversion rate by user, that might be an interesting way to approach this. Or if your organization is really focused on the traditional way conversion rate is defined with sessions as, I think, the denominator, recreating that outside of Google Analytics 4 with your own logic in Bigquery, there is still a sessions metric within GA4. And last I heard, Google's reviewing how that's being calculated because it is different than how sessions are calculated in Universal. So you can still create some of those conversion rates primarily outside of the user interface. It just depends on your business. Are you looking at trying to recreate e-commerce conversion rate where you have orders and purchase and revenue? Would you consider conversion by user versus sessions? Or is it based on different goals that you have or non-monetary actions? So it's hard to answer. I can't say Google's bringing them back for sure. You know, e-commerce conversion rate, I'm positive they've heard a lot from partners and clients that that's a critical one that's now not available. And that's feedback that Google's taking. But so far, haven't seen those in the plan. And my team can keep me honest if that is in the roadmap and I'm missing it. But, you know, the extracting, transforming, and loading it your own way, you know, TETLT, that's kind of the point of that approach if you really need those types of metrics. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Amin. We did have a question in chat that was actually already answered by Dan on our team. He leads our data visualization team, but I just want to read it for everybody. How's the Bigquery universal analytics schema will be compared to the GA4 schema? How much rework we have to do to our Bigquery queries once switched to GA4? Dan answered, it is completely different. So it's a completely different schema. Your queries will need to be rewritten. But there's a follow-up question on that, I believe, is, well, yeah.
If I can add to that, like one or two points. One, the schema is online. So GA4 Bigquery schema available in the support documentation by Google. One thing that I think our team is working on, and if Dan on our team, you're still on, maybe you can touch on this, but I think we at InfoTrust are working on a cookbook to essentially use the GA4 Bigquery schema and possibly compared to the Universal Analytics schema. Again, both schemas are on their support pages. You could pull them up side by side to look at the differences, but Dan's correct. You will have to recreate your queries and downstream integrated systems. So.
Another good question from Alyssa, what approach is recommended for items that can't be dual tagged? For example, my company uses live chat and I've been told it can only be sent to one instance of GA. Attempts to dual tag haven't been successful.
That's a very interesting question that I don't think I've been asked before. I wonder, there's a couple different ways. My initial take on that is, one, pushing on those systems that if that's the case, how are they approaching this kind of overlap period that we, Google, and every organization is recommending to dual tag? But in lieu of that, because I can understand certain vendors or platforms don't want to rewrite their entire product because of this announcement for a short period of time. There will have to be that cutoff point where you switch which property you're integrated with. It kind of comes down to how you're migrating your organization. In the meantime, there may be ways that based on the data flowing into universal analytics for those interactions, possibly extracting the data, then shooting it back into GA4. I will tell you that GA4 does have the concept of measurement protocol where you can send data into GA4 without people navigating to your website or app only. I think that might be in beta, maybe alpha. It's still early on. I don't think it's fully rolled out, the measurement protocol, like it is in universal analytics, but there might be some workarounds there. I'd have to probably get our more technical team to think of other solutions, but there are ways to get data into GA4 without just on-site visits or interactions or events. So maybe there's some, data transferring you can do that way.
Thank you, Amin. The questions are firing in. I love it. Thank you. This is way better for us if there's engagement. And this is why we host things like this, to answer your questions, hopefully, or follow up. We have a question from Palat. I don't need to set up additional TETLT process if I'm already syncing my data via Bigquery link, correct?
Good question. So so I'm gonna break down the letters. The T, dual tagging, still want to get that in place and deploy as much of the critical events and dimensions and parameters and everything you want. The last T, the training, you still need to educate yourself or the organization, however, to make GA4 the source of truth and everyone comfortable using it. But yes, if you already have Bigquery integrated to your GA4 properties and they are already dual tagged, you have that extraction point, the E in ETL, possibly already covered, because the integration of GA4 to Bigquery is similar. And again, if my team's online, they can confirm where it's a full unsampled export of all the data from GA4 into Bigquery on a regular basis. I think there's different options on how frequent you do that. I think the part that you might want to consider is just having the data stored, as well as from Universal Analytics, just stored there. That's good. But are the things you're using the UI for that when the UI goes away, you're not going to have access to? How do we get those outside of the UI if you need them in a dashboard and want to reference them longer than the period that you'll have access to UI before that's turned off? I think that's the key part. But definitely, if you already have Bigquery integrated to UA and GA4, that's a big step forward. That means you're already storing and preserving your data. Now it's just a matter of are you going to do anything with that, or is it just there in case you want to transform it or do anything? If that's it, just it's there in case we need it, then you're covered. That is preserving your UA data for sure. So.
Thank you, Amin. We have a question from Candy. Is conversion not available because sessions will not be defined? How will traffic be reportable?
Yeah, it's a good question. So conversions are still a thing, but it's the conversion rates. I think the rates are what's kind of in limbo, for lack of better words. So you're still able, and really the whole model is event-based data collection. So someone completes a lead generation form or completes an order or does something that you want them to do, you capture that as an event, you can toggle it as a conversion so that in your reporting or in your integrated systems, things you're trying to do like running Google Ads, you can tie it to, are we driving the conversions, the actions that we want people to take. The rate is what's kind of up for conversation, if you will, because while there are session-based metrics, and unless something's changed recently, and I'm happy to stand corrected, the conversion rates have not come back for into GA4. So you have conversions, you have some metrics that are sessions, and Google's kind of tweaking those, and it's unclear a little bit on how much they want to put into sessions, because that's not a durable strategy with the changing ecosystem and cookies and such. And I think that's why conversion rate is not as dominant as you will in GA4 versus UA, just because sessions are not as reliable in Google's eyes with the changing landscape. So if that helps. You can, and what we encourage at a minimum is capturing the events, capturing the conversions, and the counts of what people are doing to inform your marketing and your decisions. So.
All right, Amin, I think we have probably time for one or two more. I'm going to ask this question because I think this is a question that I'm getting on the partnership side of the house, but my customer is, or, you know, I'm missing critical features in GA4 that I need to use Google Analytics for today. You know, it's not parity for what I'm looking for as of now. What should the folks attending this call, either now or later, when their leadership saying, hey, this GA4 is not ready for our current business, you know, what is the response? How do you help sell this into an organization?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think first you need to start with, is it well articulated and aligned? What are the use cases that you have for your business? Like, let's first just get a list. What are the things that you need analytics for? Out of those, is it all of them aren't available in GA4 today? I'd be suspicious if that's the case. I think GA4 has a lot of capabilities available today, but there are some additional features for particular types of organizations. Again, I mentioned retailers, e-commerce partners. There's no doubt about it. There are some features that we are eager to have launched this year that are not available today. Product level custom dimensions, or they're also called item scope custom dimensions, custom channel groupings. Those are critical. The things that are the way I would approach it is for the things that are available today, the capabilities in GA4 that match to use cases, to get those deployed. You know, get those in place. Let's get the data collection and start building towards those now, being mindful of when new features are rolled out to immediately deploy those. Again, I'm going to come back to the product level custom dimensions because we have a lot of retail clients. It comes up a lot. We're following very closely when that will be launched, but building plans ahead of that. So as soon as it's launched in alpha or beta, we can get it deployed. So before that, we deploy other things available today. What we don't recommend is waiting for everything that you need to be ready, then start deployment. That's too late. You can start things now and iterate and build your implementation up. Again, Universal Analytics isn't being sunset till next year, till 2023. Still use it. Still use your Universal Analytics properties this year if GA4 doesn't have all the use cases rolled out yet. Once they are rolled out and you have them deployed as soon as they are rolled out because you've been planning, depending on your organization, a couple months later or as much time as you need, then you can start using GA4 exclusively. The whole point though is to start now with what you can now versus waiting for all of it, because Google's rolling things out in waves, and deploying GA4 can also be done in waves with the critical capabilities done first. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, very helpful. We just got a question in from Ethel. If I set up GA4 now, will it still coexist with UA?
Yes, yeah, dual tagging, like you have to set up a separate property for GA4. You can deploy them both. And again, Universal Analytics will continue to collect data and process data up until the 2 dates in 2023. 6+ months later, depending if you're a free property or 360, you'll have access to UI. GA4 can be deployed side by side that whole duration from now, even beyond those dates. So we do recommend at this point in time to dual tag. There has been questions like, well, when does it make sense not to dual tag? If a new site's being launched in October of this year, 2022, should I still dual tag with UA? Maybe not, maybe just GA4, but also depending on the use cases of that site, of that platform, all the features there in GA4, they should be pretty close by then, but maybe you still dual tag now. So if a site's being launched in the next 3 months, dual tag probably. Later in this year, that's where you got to make the call, like a GA4 only or still dual tag, knowing that UA will stop processing a year out. So.
Thanks, Amin. And I think it's time to wrap up. Unfortunately, I mean, I was ready to go 3 hours on this topic, but Thank you everyone for joining. We appreciate all of the questions. Thank you to our current clients, potential future clients. Thanks for joining and engaging with us today. Again, the biggest message I can take away from Amin and answering these questions is make sure you're looking at this today and how you're going to prepare your organization for the future of where analytics is going. We're super excited about it. We're happy to help. If you have questions, follow-up sessions, please reach out to us. But thank you so much for the session today. And for those of you that are wondering, in 2005, American Idol was the #1 show. Today in 2022, Yellowstone. So if you have not watched Yellowstone, it's the top trending show. So we have some homework. Thank you for the great session. Cheers to talking soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.